What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Mission Driven Made podcast. We have an amazing guest today and one that all of you are going to be highly impressed with. She's currently a firefighter in Southern California and has one of the most mind-blowing backgrounds and life experiences that you've ever heard. I want to welcome my good friend, Sierra Brown, to the High Achieving Community and Mission Driven Made podcast. Sierra, thank you for being on the show. And I can't believe I haven't seen you in, I think it's been about a year. Maybe 9 months to a year. I'm not exactly sure, but it's been way too long.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's great to see you and great to talk to you. I feel like we could talk and do this podcast for about 5 hours with all your background. So I had to just kind of hit the major points, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if I could talk about myself for 5 hours.
Oh man. So we'll dive right in to kind of dissecting your background a bit. And I want to start from the beginning. And I'm probably going to jump around a little bit, not on purpose. But if you could tell us where you are originally from and then just a little bit about your upbringing.
All right. Well, I moved around quite a bit growing up. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, only lived there for a few months. And then we moved to Laramie, Wyoming. We were there for a short amount of time too. And then to Fort Collins, Colorado. My parents were in graduate school. So it wasn't, people always ask me if I'm from a military family, but no, my parents are in education. After that, my dad ended up getting a job in Flagstaff, Arizona as a professor, and we moved there. So I was there until I was I don't know what, 11 or something, 6th grade. My parents split up and my mom moved to Albuquerque. So I ended up going back and forth between Flagstaff and Albuquerque when I couldn't drive. I mean, sometimes my parents would do the halfway meeting thing. So this was like a 5 or 6 hour drive. And my mom took me, my brother stayed with my dad in Flagstaff. So we would do this thing where we would meet like in Gallup, New Mexico. And my brother would get out of my dad's car. I would get out of my mom's car and we just switch. My brother like wave at each other and then we would drive opposite directions again. If we weren't doing that, I was either on the Amtrak or on the Greyhound by myself. And I would usually go to Flagstaff about 2 times a month to visit my dad and then spend the summers with him. At some point I decided I wanted to move back to Flagstaff. I went back there and my mom was pretty sad to have me gone. So then I went back to Albuquerque and went to school there. I had just, I guess my childhood or my adolescence, I learned to be independent really quick. And I actually loved traveling. To me, sitting on the Greyhound with all the strange people, as a, 13-year-old was always fun for me. And I love taking the train back and forth. When I was coming into my junior year, my dad was up for sabbatical. And my dad said, "Hey, do you want to go somewhere? Like, as long as your grades are good, we'll just pick a place and we'll go and spend the year together." I said, "Sure." I don't think my mom was too happy about it, but we decided to go to Australia. So me and my dad left and we moved to Perth and I was there for the year. And I had always wanted to surf. So it's kind of North Shore, the movie. I don't know if you've seen it.
I don't think so.
It's actually about a guy who's in Phoenix and he goes to one of those water parks that has a wave that you can ride, and they can ride regular boards from like 5 to 6 every day. So the guy grows up like surfing in Phoenix and then finally gets to go to Hawaii and California and actually surf. It's a funny movie. But I was kind of like that. It was my dad used to take me to the water park in Phoenix from Flagstaff, and I absolutely loved it. I was obsessed with surfing. I just wanted to surf. So we went to Australia and I got a board. We lived by the beach. I surfed every single day. Then I had to come back to Albuquerque, finish 1 year of high school, and I went to a college prep school. So it was kind of understood that I would go to some kind of Ivy League college. I had academic scholarships to Pepperdine and I think USC and Lewis and Clark and some places. And I went and visited those schools and I just didn't want to go. My mom was a teacher at my school in Albuquerque, and I was there with a lot of really wealthy kids and I wasn't. And so I just wanted to go somewhere where I was going to have more of a cultural experience. So I went to college in my first year in Hawaii in Hilo, which is a very local place. And it was very easy for me. So I took all my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I just surfed the whole rest of the time. The great thing that I learned there was just cultural. I took a couple of cultural classes where I was just kind of teaching how to live off the land, and we learned like Hawaiian chants and stuff. We went and cultivated old taro terraces, and I had a boyfriend there who was a commercial fisherman, so I learned to fish, and that was really life-changing for me. So I just spent the year there. After that, went back to Flagstaff to reevaluate what I was going to do. My dad taught, so it was free for me to go to school there. And then I decided to go to Santa Barbara. Went there for the community college, finished my lower division credits. And then my dad said, look, if you come back to Flagstaff, you can go under his tuition waiver and do a study abroad in Australia. So I went back to NAU in Flagstaff. And then I left. I did a semester there, went to Australia, did another year of college. So I moved back there 5 years later and then finished that, came back to Flagstaff. I graduated with 2 degrees, one in art and then one in geography. So that's kind of my life up till my early 20s.
That makes me feel a little bit better because I always felt so bad asking you that question over again, because you told me where you were from multiple times, but there's like 10 different pieces to that story and I would always forget. So I don't feel quite as bad now because there's so many little pieces to it.
Yeah, I kind of forget where I'm from too. Like
it does seem like the military though, or like military family,
yeah.
like you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always said this to you. I'm not even sure if I could count all of the degrees that you have, including graduate degrees. So can you kind of talk about the specific education you obtained? I know you mentioned the art degree, but maybe the other ones. And then at the same time, I remember you became a wildland firefighter. So if you can kind of talk about the degrees and then how you got into wildland firefighting.
Yeah. So growing up in Flagstaff, there's the national forest surrounding the whole town. And I kind of knew what a hotshot was. I knew what a wildland firefighter was. And I had a really good friend that I grew up with there who became a hotshot, and he wanted to be a smoke jumper. And so I kind of knew about that from him. It was just in the back of my head. When I was going to school in Santa Barbara, I met someone a girl who said that she worked on an engine with the Forest Service and she paid for her school that way. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. So when I graduated undergrad with so I had a degree in a Bachelor of Science in Geography, basically because my mom was kind of like, you can't just do the art thing. You got to have something real to make money, which I knew was real. Geography is like a soft science and stuff, but I did that. So when I finished undergrad, I moved to Ventura because I wanted to surf. I knew I was going to go to graduate school and I couldn't decide if I wanted to go for geography or for art, but I ended up deciding to go for art. So I applied to Cal State Long Beach, which has a really great art program. And I kind of threw all my eggs in one basket. I got in there and ended up also taking some graduate geography classes. So I have to jump back too. Right before I went to graduate school, I decided to take that year off. And that's when I thought, maybe I'll try that wildland fire thing. I love hiking. I love the outdoors. I want to just make a little bit of money before I start grad school. I need a little break. And so from Ventura, I went and to the Los Padres National Forest, drove around some places, and I found a station that had a female captain. And I basically, that was when I went there and I said, hey, like, I want a job here. And they hired me. So I did that season, and then I got into graduate school. I wasn't really excited about working on the engine. And then I knew about the hot shots, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I remember talking to my friend Will. I go, hey, are there any women on your hot shot crew? And he's like, no. And I said, well, you know me, like, I like hiking and skiing and mountain biking, all this stuff. Could you think I could do it? And he goes, probably not. And this was my good friend. And I remember I was so mad that I thought, okay, I just have to do this just so I can tell him. So I called when I got into graduate school, I decided, okay, I can pay for graduate school as a hotshot and do like half the year full-time graduate school, half the year on a hotshot crew. So I called pretty much every crew near Long Beach within a couple hours drive, and finally found someone that would hire me. And so that was kind of my beginning of that. And as far as my education, so I went through, finished graduate school, and then when I started with San Diego, I decided I wanted to be a GIS, do GIS, which I have the geography background, so I could be on an incident management team, which are the teams that manage large campaign fires. And so I got into a graduate program for GIS, which I have not finished, but
Gotcha.
that was my education.
That makes way more sense to me now, because I remember when we would go and speak to especially some of the high schoolers or maybe even people that are just out of college that wanted to get into wildland firefighting. I remember you'd always tell them to go to the station and introduce themselves or call the stations. So that makes perfect sense now, because that's how you got hired there, because you took the initiative to go do that. So that makes perfect sense. And I might be jumping around here because I can't remember when you did this exactly, but when did you become a boat captain, and how did that even work out?
So I was doing a lot of things simultaneously, like fire, going to school, and then also working on boats. And that kind of originated when I was in Hawaii with a boyfriend that was a commercial fisherman, and I learned to fish. And I was like, this is so cool. So when I moved to Santa Barbara and I was going to the community college there, I also needed a part-time job. And I remember thinking, like, I just want to work on a boat. And there was a girl in one of my classes who had worked as a cook on one of the boats, and one of the charter fishing boats. So I went down to I can't remember what it's called now, like the whatever sea landing. And I walked from boat to boat and just asked for a job. And somebody hired me right there. He goes, hey, my cook just quit. Can you cook on this boat? And I'm like, sure. So I had to go out that night on an overnight like albacore trip when we were going out in the Channel Islands. And I was sort of a semi-vegetarian, and I had to cook bacon and burgers and all that kind of stuff. And I was like 19 years old, but I figured it out. And I worked on boats then part-time all the way through grad school. So when I wasn't out on fires and I had weekends available, I would go out on these trips. The boat I worked on in Santa Barbara then moved down to Newport. So when I was in graduate school at Cal State Long Beach, I was able to work on that boat on and off. And all of it added up. I ended up having enough sea time to get my 100-ton captain's license. So I ended up getting that, taking the class, and having enough sea time. I think I got it in 2006, and I've just maintained that ever since. Once I got my captain's license, I stopped working on the charter fishing boats and started working on dive boats.
Gotcha. And the captain's test is really hard, right?
I wouldn't say. No, it's not really hard. I mean, what's hard is getting the sea time. So the class is really it's just a 2-week course and pretty straightforward. But what's hard is that you have to have 720 days of sea time in order to get the captain's license through the Coast Guard.
Oh wow, that's a lot of time to be able to
Yeah.
do that. Oh my gosh.
So that took me a lot of years to get that sea time.
Okay, gotcha.
Everything else
It,
that I was doing, I was pretty busy.
yeah, no, I bet. And I can't remember if I told you this. This was a little bit before we worked together, but I have that friend that owns the Maritime company that I told you about, and I
Yes.
tried to do a ride along. Did I tell you the story already?
I think so. And you got seasick?
Yep, I went out there and my friend was showing me how to operate some of the machines. And he's like, yeah, this is kind of where people, when you start staring in the screen for a while, you can start getting kind of sick. And as he was saying that, I remember getting super hot and really dizzy. And then I started just throwing up for the rest of the day. And I was sick for probably the next 24 hours. So that was my I guess that was my experience as wanting to work out on a boat. Yeah, so that was fun though. And then after all those years of wildland firefighting, and then obviously becoming a boat captain, you got hired by San Diego Fire Department. So can you kind of talk about that process? And then even better, if you could talk about the fire academy and how you succeeded in a very challenging fire academy.
Right. Okay. So um, I had, after I finished graduate school, it was 2008, and the economy was not doing good. There were basically no jobs for teaching art, which was what I wanted to do. There were some jobs in the Midwest, but I didn't want to move out there. So I continued being a hotshot and full time doing that, working on boats. And after I had actually lived, this is another part of my life. I bought a sailboat in 2006, 2005 or 2006, and I lived on that boat. So when I was going, the whole time going through graduate school, I lived on my 33-foot sailboat. Um, my neighbor was retired LA City, and he would always tell me, Sierra, you can't just be a hotshot forever. You got to go work for the city. And I remember thinking, like, no way, that's just for big guys with mustaches.
Of
And
course.
I couldn't even imagine myself in that environment because, of course, like I really had never seen a female municipal firefighter. I remember going to elementary school, and one of the guys, his dad, huge guy, was a firefighter. He'd come to our class, but I just couldn't even imagine myself in that environment. But my neighbor said, "Hey, I'll take you. We'll go. The CPAT is that the physical test." He's like, "We'll go. I'll help you do like a practice course with the CPAT and help you through the hiring process." And so he really did help me through the hiring process. And I started applying to different fire departments, not because I didn't like being a hotshot. I guess I just wanted a different schedule. And I was in my early 30s at that point. I had no retirement. I had never thought about my future. All the years on the hotshots, it was kind of difficult for me to be in a relationship or have kids or anything like that. So I thought it might be a good change of pace for me to do something more responsible, give myself a little bit more time to do the other things I enjoy in my life. So yeah, I applied, and I got hired with San Diego City, and I decided to just take the leap and go for it. I didn't know anyone in San Diego at the fire department. I was kind of completely on the fringe of things, and I feel like I didn't really have the help that a lot of other people that knew the system did. So I showed up kind of under prepared. So the academy was a huge struggle for me. I at least was very physically fit, and I was a really good runner, so I could run faster than most of the guys. I could do push-ups, I could do pull-ups, all of that. But I'm about 125 pounds, so some of the hose evolutions and the hose lays were pretty difficult for me. We had these things called certifications where you had to do something in a certain amount of time and pass the certification. And you would get 3 chances to pass that certification. If you didn't pass it, then you were out of the academy. And there was, I remember one day where I had gotten to my second attempt and failed 3 of the certifications. And I had to test 3 certifications. And if I did not pass any of them, I was going to be out of the academy. And I had to take all of those tests in one day. One of them was you probably remember the up the ladder charge, 1.75 inches. And I don't know how I passed all these things, but that morning I thought, okay, I'm going to really focus on all this stuff and I'm not going to get stressed out. And I ended up passing everything. And the 1.75 inches I passed by 4 seconds. So I always think to myself, like, I have my job now because of the way we test and because of our hiring process. I got it by 4 seconds.
That is insane. And I remember talking about that specific certification with you. You were telling me that was one of the hardest ones. And I remember like leaning over your 2 or 3 stories up, if I remember correctly, and pulling a really heavy hose just straight up. And I remember that was hard for everyone at first. I mean, people that were over 200 pounds, that was hard for. So
yeah, that
I
was
think, yeah.
Something where a lot of people fail the academy because of that hose lay. And the funny thing now is that all 3 of the certifications that I almost didn't pass, they don't have anymore.
What?
Yeah, so it's not even part of the process.
They took those out?
Yeah, they took them out.
Oh
Another
my
one
gosh.
was the hose control, 2.5-inch hose control. They don't have that anymore. You just do it with a strap.
I wonder why they took those out. I wonder if too many people were failing them.
And maybe because we don't use them in real life.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But I think I told you I went to a 3rd attempt with one of the certifications, which was one of the easier ones too. So it's kind of embarrassing. Do you remember the 1.75 inch hose control?
Yes.
Just similar to what you were just talking about. I went to a 3rd attempt on that one, and it was right before final testing. And I was like, am I going to lose my entire career because of this one stupid certification? But
Right.
that was stress like no other, thinking, you had to go through it 3 times. Like, that's really cool that you were so collected.
Stressful. I think
Yeah.
I'm known for that.
Known for working well in the stressful situations, or
doing so bad in the academy and still passing.
I love that though. I mean, that says so much, because that academy is so challenging and so unforgiving. And the part that was hard for me, it was so fast paced, and I didn't have experience in a lot of the stuff personally. So you had to learn one thing, and if you messed up on that, I mean, the academy doesn't stop for you. So I remember struggling immensely with some of the stuff. So I think that's like the coolest part of the story, hearing you say that. Like, you went to that last certification attempt 3 times and you still passed.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I mean, I had just told myself that day, I can't go into it with fear because I'm going to be distracted. I just have to focus. And if I don't pass, I have other jobs. I have other things that I can do.
Awesome. And so you passed the academy. You're obviously, super excited about that. And then I know sometime sort of in the beginning, you left to go smoke jump. And this is one of my favorite parts of your story, that I always love that we get to talk about when we go and speak to classes or do presentations. So can you tell the listeners what smoke jumping is and how you accomplished that feat?
Yeah, so smoke jumpers parachute out of airplanes into mostly wilderness areas, lightning strikes, but places that are otherwise inaccessible by road, even by helicopter maybe. And they are self-sufficient. So the airplane drops all the cargo, the food, water, chainsaws, tools, sleeping bags. And the cool thing about smoke jumpers is that they don't require really any additional assistance. And so that's one reason that they can be ordered up on a fire, is that basically they do their own thing, they take care of it. So they'll be out on a fire, anywhere from a day or two to a couple weeks. And when they're done, they have to pack up all their stuff and hike it out typically, and find a trail or something like that, and eventually end up at a road where they will get picked up. So because they're pretty independent resources, is you're like a single resource as a smoke jumper. You're always going to be at a fire with different people. Some fires might just drop 2 people, some might have 10. And there's like, I can't remember now, I think there's 8 different jump bases in the country. So I had already established a relationship with the Reading jump base, because I wanted to go there when I was a hotshot. And I had instead taken the job with San Diego. And so it was still on the back burner, and it was something that I really wanted to do. Once I finished probation, I contacted our Chief Hennessy, and told him that this was something that I really wanted to do. Basically asked for a leave of absence, and if I could make everything work, where like get Reading to hire me, which would be very atypical for them to hire a municipal firefighter, and let the city of San Diego allow me to take up this leave of absence, and then also for me to pass rookie training, which is extremely difficult and a lot of people fail. If all of those things could align, then I could be a smoke jumper or go through the season, be certified. And my plan was to go back and do that and jump for a couple months every year and still keep my job with San Diego City and kind of fulfill that desire to be out in the wilderness and be working hard and just doing what I really love to do. Because when I was with the city, I did miss the work with the Forest Service, and I miss working outside. So everything aligned for me, and Reading hired me. Chief Hennessy let me go, and I barely passed rookie training because I had spent the last 2 years with the city. My fitness was not where it was when I was a hotshot, and my rookie class, I believe I was 38 years old. I think I'm the oldest female who's rookie smoke jumping, and there were 2 other guys in their 30s, and they were done the first week. They dropped out. Then there were 7 other guys, and they were in their mid 20s, and they were running like 8 5-minute miles,
Oh my gosh.
I was in okay shape. Like I could run, I was running 6 7-minute miles, but these guys were still way in front of me. And so it was really challenging. And we were also doing a transition from the round parachutes to the ram air, the square ones. And so we ended up having to go to Boise for our training. And on our last day of practice with the ram air, I remember they had like these little mock airplanes that are close to the ground where you practice your exits and your jump counts. And I had messed up a couple things, so I was like borderline. They were, looking at every move that I was making. And that last Friday, where we were just before we were going to start jumping out of the actual plane, I jumped early. The spotter's supposed to slap your shoulder, and that's when you jump. Well, I saw his hand out of the corner of my eye, and right before it actually touched my shoulder, I jumped. So I exited early, and right then they said, okay, you're done. You're going home. And I literally packed up my stuff, and someone picked me up from Reading when I was with Boise, and they started driving me back to Reading. And at that point, I was going to have to tell Chief Hennessy that I didn't pass. And I had, all these people in San Diego that were like, what are you doing? You just got this great job, and now you're going to go smoke jump. So I kind of had a lot riding on me. And that was when, I remember telling my parents, I just failed. And they were like, what, you never fail at anything. So I had to go through kind of accepting myself at not passing rookie training. Well, when I got to Reading, I got a phone call and they were like, you showed up in shape and you tried and you were almost there. Do you want a second chance? We'll send you to Redmond, Oregon, and you can go through their rookie training again, but you'll do it on just the regular round parachute, which is easier because it's a static line instead of dynamic. So the jump counts and everything are easier. And I was kind of beat up at the point because the smokejumper rookie training is so difficult physically, but I said, sure, I'll go. And so I went up to Redmond and I did another 6 weeks of training and I passed. So
just beat up for week after week.
Yeah, I was totally beat up, but I passed.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. And just the thought, like, I can't even imagine what was going on in your head. You're driving back thinking you failed, and then you get a phone call, and then you're back at it again. You don't even get a break. Wow.
Right.
Wow. That's I almost forgot about that part of your story. And can you kind of talk about, what happens next with your hip?
So, okay. At that point, it was mentally, I knew I'd passed, but I wasn't feeling great because I barely made it. And then I also barely made it through the academy at San Diego. And I was just like, I'm doing these things that are difficult, but I'm like the worst at these things. And so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, probably not, but I did 25 jumps and it was towards the end of the season, and on a practice jump I just had an awkward landing where my leg kind of jammed up into my hip, and I got up and I knew automatically that there was something majorly wrong, but they videotape your landings and your exits on the practice jumps, and there was people on the ground. They said, hey, that looked like a hard landing. Are you okay? And I said, yeah, I am. I'm fine. Gathered up my gear and walked over to our truck, and my hip hurt really bad, but I did not say anything. And the next day I couldn't run. And I filled out a minor injury form, and they were like, maybe you just bruised your hip or something. So I said, okay. They made me do some extra, I forgot what this thing was called, like I don't know, it's just some thing where they pull you up on your harness and then drop you really hard and you practice your landings. So they made me go on that thing, which would probably beat up my hip even more. And then they put me back on the jump list. And a couple days later, I jumped a fire with my hip messed up. When we were out there, I was just like taking ibuprofen, and I was in serious pain. So that was 7 days on the fire. And then we had a 10-mile pack out, and our packs are over 100 pounds. We hiked out, and I was almost just like dragging my leg, and I said, I need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and they did an MRI, and they were like, you are done. You have to be on bed rest. You cannot put any weight on your femur, because I had fractured the head and the neck of my femur, but there was a lot of blood and just damage in the whole joint. And I immediately they said there's not even a surgeon up here that can do surgery on your hips. So there was a guy in San Diego, fortunately. So I was driven down to San Diego, and I got surgery from a really good surgeon who has been a surgeon for Navy SEALs and familiar with bad parachute landings. And they put in some, polished my femur, put in some anchors and cables and stuff. And I ended up having multiple surgeries and being on bed rest for a few months and not walking for quite some time, and basically being out for almost 2 years.
Oh my gosh, I forgot. I forgot that you hiked on it for a week after
Yeah,
you heard it. I thought it was like you just kept going that day. It was a whole week that you kept going.
yeah, it was pretty stupid of me. I might not have been in the same position if I had just immediately gone to the hospital.
I mean, what was it just excruciating the whole week where you're hiking on it?
It was excruciating, but I had already almost failed. And I actually did fail when we were in Boise. And so this was another thing where it's like, here I am, older, and I got hurt. And I so bad did not want to be hurt that I just kept going. And then I realized that I couldn't. I couldn't.
Oh my gosh, it's just one thing after another that you're getting through.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's crazy to think about. Even though I've heard part of that story a bunch of times, when you really think about it, it's insane that you kept going, especially for an entire week. I mean,
Mhm.
you probably still wouldn't at least needed surgery or something, right? Like even if you didn't keep going.
I'm sure I still would have needed surgery, but it might not have been so bad. I mean, I think I ended up having 3 surgeries that were related to that accident. Um, I know I made it worse.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I want to transition a little bit into your athletic background. Um, and I don't know exactly where this fits in with your hip, but can you kind of go into the sports that you were a part of, or how about the competitive sports that you were a part of?
Okay. Yeah, so I didn't really do like the standard team sports when I was growing up. I skied and I raced mountain bikes in high school. I was on the cross country team. And then I started surfing when I was in Australia. And I did, I did some surfing competitions. Um, in my early 20s, I was pretty into the mountain bike racing and I was in like the expert pro category, did some national races and nothing like crazy, but was something that I was decent at. And then I had always been a runner as well. So before I hurt my hip, I was running ultramarathons, the 50-mile distance, and I had probably a handful before I went to jump where I was in the top 5, and I had won my actually had won my first race for the female category, with probably I think just a few guys in front of me on that. Um, and then also spearfishing was something that I was really into, and I still am now. But that's not a competitive thing. That's just something that I love to do.
Awesome. And tell everyone about the world record that you hold.
Oh, okay. So I have the women's world record for calico bass, but it was just taken off the board.
Oh no, it
Well,
was?
I still have the world record, but they got rid of any fish under 10 pounds. So I'll have to go find another fish.
When did they do that?
Last year.
Oh my gosh, because I remember looking it up a couple years
Yeah,
ago when you were telling me
I
about
I
it.
was trying to show someone and I was looking at on the website and I'm like, where the heck is my name? They took it out.
That's messed up.
I know.
It still counts though, I think.
It still counts. I still have it.
Yeah, they just made it disappear.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of telling me offline a bit. So can you kind of tell us about your race that you have coming up?
Yeah. So basically my surgeons told me that I probably wouldn't run again. And I went through a period where I didn't even know if I was going to be able to work again. But I hired a really good physical trainer and therapist, and I really dedicated 3 or 4 hours a day after my light duty position with you in recruitment with San Diego City, where I was able to slowly make a recovery. And I mean, it was very gradual, like run 15 seconds, walk a minute, deadlift 5 pounds. Like it was so gradual, but eventually I last year was able to start running distance again. And um, I about 2 weeks ago I did a 50-mile run with my brother in Arches National Park, and the year before we had done a 50-mile run through Zion. So that was during COVID. All the races were canceled. It's been my goal to run a 100-miler, and especially after this accident, to go do my first 100-miler. So I just registered for my first 100-miler, and I feel like I'm almost ready for it.
What's like a training day like for that? I know you've told me a little bit in the past, but
Well, so some of the 50-mile runs that I've done, like just a couple weeks ago, that's a training one. Couple days ago, I did a 28-mile run with a friend. So kind of like one day a week, I'll go out and spend the day running. And then the rest of the week, I do other stuff. I row, I do some weights, and that's mostly injury prevention and like hip strengthening stuff that I always have to do. So I just kind of try to keep my weekly mileage now above 50. And I know some people, they have a weekly mileage that's up towards 100, but I try to do more cross training because I just don't know if my hip can really handle that weekly mileage over and over again. But I'll probably do a couple runs where I do back-to-back runs. So maybe 25 or 30 miles of trails that are somewhat difficult, and then do it again the next day. I'll do that not so often, every couple months or something. And then I'll probably, coming up here, start doing some nighttime running, where I'll go for a long run during the day, maybe 30 miles, and then eat dinner, take a little break, and then go out maybe at 10 o'clock at night and run for another 4 or 5 hours to get myself used to that kind of 24-hour running period and running at night.
yeah, I was just going to ask you, what's like a quote unquote normal time it would take someone to do 100 miles?
I would say somewhere, I mean, it really depends on the course, but somewhere between, 24 and 30 hours. And a 24-hour time is a really good one. And, but depending on the course, 28 hours could also be good. And then there's some really fast courses and fast runners that they might be up at 16 or 18 hours, which is insane. But my goal for this race in Phoenix would be about 25, 24 hours.
Wait, so are people literally like running that whole time, or is there a lot of breaks that people take
I
throughout
mean,
that time?
it really depends on the athlete. So the people that are getting those fast times,
Yeah.
they're pretty much running the whole time. And then the slower finishers around, 30 hours and stuff, they might run 70 miles, walk 30.
Oh my gosh, that's I can't even comprehend 100 miles. That is insane. But I'm really excited to, since you're doing it in Phoenix, like we were saying, we're definitely come cheer you on at least at the end of the race.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
And any future plans that you can kind of tell the listeners about that you have? It can be athletic, it can be the fire department, other career stuff, anything.
Well, I do have a goal, and I think after the injury, I just I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm going to get hurt again. And so I'm kind of looking towards teaching art again and going back into doing something more creative, and possibly having some kind of a career switch. And I think a lot of that has to do with the injury and kind of going through a few years of struggling where I'm ready to use my mind more. And I always
Yeah.
told myself, like, I'll use my body until it breaks. And I mean, my body isn't totally broken. I'm about to run a 100-mile race, but with all the heavy weight that we have in the fire department, I just don't want to tweak something or be in an uncontrolled environment where I end up not being able to run and do the other things that I love.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And all right, so Sierra, this is going to be the last part of the show. I want to give you the floor for a couple minutes. So you've obviously achieved success at so many different levels. And not only did you achieve success, you had roadblocks like just about everywhere in your story. There was something where most people probably would have just given up. So if you can kind of leave the listeners with some takeaways or something tangible, like how you overcame so many obstacles and how someone else could do the same thing too.
Yeah. So one thing that I think of is just, I guess, our typical notions of what success and what failure mean. And um, for me, I'm no different than anyone else. And I go into all this stuff with a ton of fear. And so for me, it's just about like how I deal with that fear. And sometimes for me, it's something little, like I'm going to a fire station working overtime with people that I don't know. And I'm scared of driving there. And it's so, I've done it enough times that I have the fear. I have fear of failure, but I don't let it get in my way. And a lot of it is just showing up somewhere. So you put the effort into making something happen, and then you just show up. Like I was terrified my first day of showing up at Reading with the smoke jumpers, and feeling like I had all this stuff on the line, what people thought of me, all the effort that I had put into arranging this. And I think some of it, then you just show up and you deal with the day, and you're like, oh, it's the end of the day, I'm still here. I'm still alive. Like, then you just do that day after day, and I think things get easier. And then also realize like it's not the end of the world. Our definitions of failure, if I didn't make it, I still tried. And so there's always, there's the whole norm, whatever the motivational quotes and stuff, that there's success and failure, but it really is true. And for anything, I just try not to just put the fear aside, but also tell myself it's okay to have fear going into anything.
Absolutely. And I love how you talked about just kind of winning the day, just kind of the one day thing, especially since, the academy's 4 or 5 months long, and then your rookie training and all that stuff, just win the day. I absolutely love that. And Sierra, where, sorry, go ahead.
I have also been at points where it's hourly. I'm like, I'm still here. It's not even just the day, it's by the hour.
Yeah, just make it to lunch, like in the fire academy. Just make it to lunch. And where can people connect with you if like they have questions or wanting to get into the fire department or want advice? Where would they be able to find you?
They can email me at sierragareth@gmail.com. So
Perfect.
That's Sierra, SIERRAGARETH, Sierra Gareth. That's my unfortunate middle name.
Awesome. And I'll link that in the show description for everyone. And thank you everyone for listening to the Mission Driven Made podcast. If you found value in this, as always, subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, share with a friend. We are going to have some books and courses coming out, as I mentioned before. So stay tuned for all of that. And go ahead and go to missiondrivenmade.com to subscribe to the weekly blog and newsletter, and then get all your apparel there. Sierra, thank you so much for being on the show and bringing all the value to the listeners. Until next time, everyone, stay mission driven. And done.